Okay. Thanks, everyone. I think it was wonderful to understand to a couple of interesting fireside chats where actually the innovators and the customers were having a very interesting chat. So I love that. I think that was a fantastic approach to really get both these stakeholders together. So I'm going to take a attempt at talking about my views on the transformational role of startups of innovators, and we will probably pick up a few of the key segments where the IoT has been talked about very broadly: smart cities, transportation, and then retail. So we'll kind of discuss about what's happening in these areas, what is that we are watching this space for, and then also talk about what is in there for startups and innovators to really see how this marketplace can really become more interactive. So let me start by showing a quick video. Can we play the video one, please? Some volume. That's okay, we can neglect the volume part, but I think you can get the messages. The way we are watching this space is various use case emerging from a smart city perspective, whether this is sensors telling us what to do, essentially facilitating our action on the ground, and obviously there are various technologies enabling that. So I think the idea is that really show the possibilities of technologies which are coming from various technology interventions, and that opens up a lot of possibilities for startups to really emerge. So we can move on by just looking at some of the areas which we are talking about. That's okay, I think it's fine. So I think the theme what we started with is that yes, technology is transforming the way we live and work. And I think one of the examples which we heard that even in remote locations like Bihar and Jharkhand, the technology is making an impact to improve our lives, our healthcare, and the way we are really kind of serving the human race also. It's also possible that we are using some of the other benefits for technology. It could be increase in efficiencies, increasing productivity, increased security in projects like digital surveillance for smart cities, and also provide a way to really make this entire technology play for you in more, making lives more easier, more simple. I think that's where the technology is really transforming. And definitely startups and innovators are picking up these aspects of technology to make those use cases more attractive, more interesting, and then bring together a model where they are looking at something which can be done in a futuristic scenario, and also look at what are the possibilities we exist. So if I had to really look at the way startups and innovators are approaching this, they will look at some of the problem statements which that you work on, but just by looking at technology is not sufficient enough. If I had to look at a technology alone, capitalizing on technology, it has its own challenges, right? Because you are really looking at what is that you are solving as a problem. Do you have the problem of the consumer or the customer really figure it out? So I think that's a key part before making that choice of going in a direction and start your venture as an innovator or as a startup. So obviously, making that problem statement clarity is very critical. The second aspect is that to make that thing happen, and today you are seeing, I'm sure the last 2 days you have seen so many aspects of technology. It's AI, it's machine learning, deep learning, blockchain, IoT. It's kind of evolving as we speak. So how do I bring the right components together to make that choice of my technology selection a better one? And it should be there with me for a period of time which I'm ready to service my customers for. So I think that's a critical part which all of us are facing as a challenge, because there's no one technology who's going to take precedence or other. There will be always a combination and overlap of technologies which are going to play together to make life more challenging for entrepreneurs to select what is that stack of technology components I'm going to pick it up from. The third part is that, will my investment pay off? if I'm investing my money, my investors' money in a venture, how do I get my money back, either from my customers or from my sellout of the company as IP? So I think definitely there's a need to ensure that the innovators and the entrepreneurs are to be made aware of the business models which are going to be prevalent in the changing world of today. We saw a very interesting business model use case where renting an equipment which was designed for some kind of e-healthcare system was very effectively used. So again, these kind of business models are going to be very effective, and startups have to be really worrying about how can I ensure that I can not only pivot the business model alone, but also look at various forms of new areas where I can price rightly, I can service the customers right, and also handle key challenges beyond technology which any of the startups will face when you are looking at transformation. Now, don't get worried. I don't think this is like a kind of a sore tablet just to kind of tell you, hey, this is not going to work in that crazy fashion. But the key part is that if you have to bring in disruption, you have to really bring in some kind of transformation. I think anybody in the industry has to focus on three themes. I think that's what we have learned. We have observed as we have engaged with startups across various themes, various events. I think the first part is you need to be thinking disruptive. You need to be thinking about, can I do something specific to solve the same problem which I identified in a radical way? And yesterday in a couple of keynotes we heard about the bigger disruptive models of Uber and Teslas of the world. But again, at the ground level, we are also seeing many disruptive models emerging from ground level startups. Again, there are quite examples. I was watching the booths down there, and there are so many examples where people have thought about the problem in a very different approach, and they're really creating solutions which are solving their problems. I think that's where the disruptive thinking comes in, and you need to really also use that to really get going. And again, all this technology which we're talking about, I think if you have that thinking about how can I really think about the problem statement in a different way and find out the possibilities, I think that's where the innovation can happen. The second aspect is how do I ensure that the user is at the center of my problem solving? I think we talked about in the last couple of fireside chats. Understanding the German needs is very, very crucial in solving that particular problem. So obviously you need to put the user at the center of your problem solving statement and ensure that you are designing something for that user needs in mind, that user's requirements in mind. I think that's a very key challenge for all startups to really keep on their drawing board and ensure that they are tracking the needs for the users and then creating something which is very useful and relevant for that user requirements. And the third part is, yes, possibilities. You have a gamut of technologies available to you. So idea is that if you are creating a mashup of these technologies, what could be the possibilities you have? We are talking about examples of smart city. And again, when we look at the smart city segments, whether this is as basic as solid waste management to citizen kiosk to digital surveillance, there are so many possibilities which can emerge, which can facilitate the actions on the ground in a very unique way. I think that's where the innovators had to think about, can I create something which is unique and it has a great value proposition for my customers to use from? That's where I can differentiate myself from the other people who are playing this space. Now, we kind of try to create some kind of separation between the startup and the innovator, because innovator is like a free soul. He will kind of try and always create something new, even if there is no business model attached to it. But startup obviously coming with a business mind along with that. What we thought was that if we are providing them the necessary insights and the inputs to create that mindset, which is definitely international focused. And again, I was very glad to see the example of the automotive sector where the startups in India are now thinking outside and also focusing on the international needs and having that mindset. I think that's very critical to make that transformation from our industry, and not only from talking about solutions in India alone, but also talk about what we can do outside customers also. Collaborative approach is critical because as we are creating more and more technology interventions from companies like Intel and IBM and Microsoft, obviously you collaborate with all the stakeholders, create that model of connecting together and then innovating together. And again, the role of incubators and accelerators in making that collaboration work is very, very critical. I think that's where we have the NASSCOM IoT COA playing a very leading role to make that collaboration work and then bringing all the right stakeholders together to make that work. And obviously obviously creative and digital first way of doing things. I think these are very essential mindsets for that transformation to happen for any of these two buckets of either a startup as a venture or innovator at a very individual level. Now, what we're going to do is that we'll probably skip this slide because we have been talking about enough about the trends and Gartner and all the stuff. I think to summarize that, I think the key part is that the three trends, and sorry about the alignment, I think we had some issue with the alignment on the screen. But the key part is that we have been always talking about these three topics for the last 2 days of conference. I'm sure IoT, AI, and then VR. If you are watching some of the booths out there, again, VR has been there very prominently used as one of the technology intervention. Now, these technologies, from my perspective, are very essential to really understand what's going to happen in the next few years' time and the kind of segments which I talked about. And again, the interesting part is that these technologies are not living in isolation. There's going to be a mashup. There's going to be a combination of IoT and AI and VR and so on and so forth. Because of that, we need to be really aware of, are we touching only one, or are we touching one or two, or all three? So I think that's where the focus on technology intervention has to happen. And I think startups need to start thinking on those lines, that how can I really understand the role of each of these technologies for my business and see how can I pick up the right interventions across these three broad areas. So let's look at, by looking at AI and the possibilities the AI can bring. I'm sure you have been watching the sessions in the last 2 days where people have talked about AI, machine learning, deep learning. Now, what I thought was, let me capture some of the broader use cases where it's really changing the world. And again, these requirements can come from various countries. It can be applied to country-specific problems. But net, I think accelerating few of the use cases in terms of changing the way we have been treating healthcare, changing the way we have been finding cures for diseases. Again, that's a way we can intervene with AI. We can look at some of the deep tech problems to solve it. Again, there's a quite a lot of research requirement to coming in, and there's a great industry academia work required to make that happen. And then we can augment some of the existing customer facing activities, where it could be our in-store experience or our way we are reaching out to our cities to give us guidance on what we should do in terms of situations of traffic or whatever city specific situations. So all of these is really adding value to the way we have been living in this world, and I'm sure AI is going to bring in a sea change in the way we are working with information and making sure that we are making the right decisions. Data alone is not sufficient enough. You need to have actionable data. You need to find insights from the data. I think AI and IoT are really going to churn that data into meaningful insights. I think that's what all we're looking at. And again, as a startup or as an innovator, you can only focus on that problem. Can I solve that insight challenge by shifting the data and then bring out the insights in a meaningful way by any decision maker who wants to make use of that? Even if you're working on that problem, you can definitely find very interesting use case for your business, for your startup, to really service a very specific need in this entire big issue of how to manage data and how to generate insights from. We have been talking about IoT. Now, the challenge of IoT, as we have been seeing from Inter's perspective, is multifaceted. There are so many aspects of IoT, not only from the devices on the ground. How do you really connect the devices? How do you bring that data back to the cloud in a secure way? How do you ensure that the devices are trusted from a security perspective? How do you ensure that the devices which are there on the ground are managed and monitored and tracked properly? As you start adding all these facets of the rough cut, whatever you call the IoT diamond, the things become very hard. It's very easy to create a rough prototype and then show, hey, this is how my use case works. But as you start implementing the same solution in a scalable fashion, the things are becoming more and more complex. I think that's where the startups and innovators will start getting into some kind of stone wall. How do I really understand IoT in a much more larger, scalable, complex way, and then try to solve those problems not at a prototype level alone, but at a scale level? I think that's where the real interesting conversations are now happening. And I'm sure as we are hearing the smart cities, now I'm sure they are also going through the same pains. It's very easy to kind of show a prototype in some kind of specific scenario, but as you start rolling it out across cities, across multiple cities, and try to integrate the entire wisdom from that, that's where we'll see a lot of interesting ideas evolve. And I think that's where the startups can play a very meaningful role in at least visualizing those issues and then start thinking about it. Can I solve this specific problem? As we are looking at this entire wave of IoT, we are also looking at some very interesting technologies coming and helping us to make that work. All of us have heard of cloud computing, right? Anybody who has not heard of cloud computing? Who has heard of fog computing, which is the next buzzword, right? So what fog does is really brings that cloud to the edge. I think Annie talked about in a very short span. The way we are now managing this entire complex IoT deployments is, if you are able to compute most of your decision-making capabilities at the edge itself, you don't have to spend time, effort, and money to send that data on the cloud all the time. As you are aware that we are talking about billions of sensors getting added to the entire IoT bandwagon. So do we require these sensors to send data all the time, or can we then ensure that only that data is sent to on the cloud, which is useful and meaningful? Imagine the surveillance projects which we are currently seeing in the country. I think most of the large cities we have the DSS projects they implemented. Look, imagine the amount of video data which has been sent up and down to those command and control centers where we are just watching a screen on the big monitor. Is that something which we need to continue keep on doing it, or can we ensure that we can only look at that data which is based on incidents, which is based on certain insights which the traffic signals at the edge are capturing, and only sending that data out as a cloud service instances? I think those are the interventions that are going to happen, and we anticipate that the fog is going to take much more interesting role in deployment of larger scale IoT solutions across the globe, across various verticals. And then you can look at whether this is for video analytics, for smart city, you can look at for industrial healthcare. Again, you can debate various models of where this can play a role. And again, the challenges of lack of network availability, lack of bandwidth, lack of latency, all those things can play a role in various use cases where you're seeing a cloud and fog can get deployed. I think this is what we have been hearing, key opportunities in this area: smart city, retail, transportation, industrial. What we'll do is that I'll talk about few things in smart city. Now, smart city is just not only about IoT. I think I'm sure you must have heard some of the smart city presentations which the key guys from the local municipal corporations did about a few hours back. I think the key part is that it's all about setting up an infrastructure, both digital and non-digital, to service the need for a common platform of services for citizens to really make use of that. I think that's a key part. It's just not only about IoT. IoT is just one part of that which brings in some kind of sensing capability for that city or for that area which I would go to cover. The second part is that you are also deploying a lot of applications and services on top of the infrastructure. I think that's where the key part, where you are now seeing areas like solid waste, smart lighting, parking. These are the kind of 6 or 7 areas where are defined by the smart city ministry or whatever that urban body is looking at. Now, as a startup, what we have seen is that there are many startups who are playing in these use cases in bits and pieces. There are point solutions available in smart parking. There are point solutions available in solid waste management. There are smart solutions in, let's say, creating some kind of dashboarding possibility. Now, the challenge is that not all these solutions land in the smart city project, because the reason is that the entire bidding and the deployment process of smart city is slightly complex, right? You need to have a master SI who is bidding for the project, and if you are not forming a consortium with those smart city master SIs, your solution may not even hit the ground. So obviously, as a startup or as an innovator, if you have a play in that space, you will need to find out who are these guys who can take your solution to the actual bidding as well as the deployment stage. I think making those connection is where is going to be very, very critical. The second aspect is that making sense of information. We talked about the sensors pushing data out. How do you ensure that data is really translated into information which you can action on? Again, the cities are in a very early stages of deploying this infrastructure, maybe by next year they will start getting this humongous amount of data, and that's where they will start asking questions, what do I do with this data? So again, that's where you need to make kind of attempt to sense the information from that, and then really see how you can help in making that work. I think the idea is that not only smart but intelligent. Smart is one part of it, but can we get meaningful insights to really make that way of making that decisions on the fly and not really wait only for a postmortem kind of decisions based on the infrastructure what we have created. I think that's where the smart city across the globe are moving towards. So next version is going to be intelligent cities, not only smart cities. Interoperability is a key area where we see the smart cities are going to be a problem to solve. We have about 100 smart cities as project defined by Government of India. There are already 20 plus cities in different phases of tendering plus deployment happening. But what about interoperability? Can city of Pune pass on data to city of Bhubaneswar or to Calcutta or to Chennai or whatever? I don't know. It could be across your surveillance systems, it could be across the systems of your land records, it could be of anything else which you have been talking about at the city level specific. I think these are things which will happen. Again, we are not alone in this space. India is not alone in space. This is happening across cities globally. Nobody is able to have a handle on can they interoperate the different instances of smart cities deployment in various countries in the world. Again, US is also no different than what we have been doing in India. The challenge is that, yes, you will need to scale for all these future activities. At the same time, there is a great need for hyperlocal solutions emerging. We have been working with the companies like Bosch for environment monitoring, and we're working with companies like Honeywell for all the street lighting. But when we come to the Indian situations of our local tendering as well as local solution requirement, we still require the hyperlocal solutions which are evolved grounds up from the startups. And now we have been doing a catalog of local providers who are giving the solutions so we can enable them and then take it to our master SIs who can bid together and then bring those hyperlocal solutions in these bid projects. And again, I'm kind of very happy to say that the transformation is happening by these hyperlocal solutions, whether this is command and control, whether this is traffic monitoring solutions, smart parking. We have always been very successful in using a local solution ahead of a global MNC player. I think that's a very interesting transformation which we are seeing on the ground. I think what we need to do is that look at the transformation not only from a technology perspective but also from an Indian conditions perspective. In smart cities, at least, we have seen that setting the expectation of what is really smart means. I think that's where we need to really set the expectations right. We heard the example, like what is the smart way of doing things in Germany is very different than what it means in India, even at least in the transportation or driving sector. Same will go true for other sectors in smart city also. What it means for a US smart city could be so different than what it means for an Indian smart city. So can we then level set the expectations right so that our startups are not really creating a solution which is designed for a specific city in the world, but focused on the markets which it's really serving for. We also look at it from a transportation vertical also. Again, we have been seeing a lot of changes in the way we have been approaching transport. Again, I'm kind of shifting gears from the smart city to transport. I was very happy to see so many interesting use cases being shown at the Startup Expo down below. Aggregation of fleets, monitoring, and then creating very use cases for large fleet activities. It's again happening big time. We are looking at interesting way of renting equipment both in transport and in the farming equipment side. Companies like Mahindra have been doing their own bit to create a startup to really rent out farming equipment to farmers. Again, that's a very interesting business model based on an existing OEM business. Now, I'm sure truck aggregation has been tried before. I was just reading some reports out. A lot of people started doing that and it kind of went up and down. But maybe with this entire GST coming in, I think it's going to change because GST brings in a lot of clear guidance on the transport sector to manage the way bills, the data around that. I think this could really change the way even the transport sector was organized. And again, there's a great opportunity for startups to intervene in that and then create a specific solution on transport. We are not seeing too many solutions coming from India to augment supply chain and effectively handle transportation en masse. Yes, we are doing supply chain for a specific OEM or a specific manufacturing customer, but look at the entire chain of transportation. Again, there are opportunities where startups can really figure it out and they can add more value to it. We haven't heard anything about AI in transportation, have we? We heard of it in fintech, we heard of it in telecom, in consumer, and in retail. But have we thought about AI in transportation? Maybe not. I think that's where the possible thinking can come in, and people can look at where these technologies can help, and even bringing as, I would say, mundane sector like transport to become really more useful and more focused on efficiency of sort. I think we have already heard about the telematics and connected cars, so probably I'll not touch upon those topics, but I think those are the areas where there are opportunities coming up, and with advent of automated vehicles, 5G coming in, there are huge amount of data which is going to get churned out, and I think that's where there is opportunity for all the startups who are focused on that sector. I'm going to show you one interesting slide which we have been kind of captured with our efforts on automotive sector. Look at the amount of data which is going to be generated, whether this is based on the sensors inside the vehicle, radar sensors and lidar sensors. I think that's where the data is going to be generated. Again, it's up to us to really figure it out how we can make use of the data. Again, this is going to really be interesting in the next few years' time. I don't know whether Jugan said that it's 2020 or 2023, doesn't matter, but the next few years are going to be very interesting to see how we can play with this data which is coming from us, from all these sensors just inside our vehicles, as well as our sensor ecosystem in and around our vehicles and the roads. I think I'm going to skip those couple of videos because we'll probably take it at the end. Are you able to play the video? Okay. Let me play a quick video. This is around the retail sector, the way we are seeing some change happening in retail.
New kind of energy. Not that, or that. Nope, it's data. Raw, inexhaustible, unstoppable data. And with it, retailers are gaining a greater understanding of their customers, supply chains, and employees. Today, overstocked or understocked inventory accounts for over $1.2 trillion in lost sales globally. But the future isn't having any of that. Because the future knows what customers want before they do. Harnessing data like heat maps and foot traffic analytics, retailers can virtually design store layouts on the fly, or focus on the products that fly off the shelf, ensuring that customers are getting what they want when they want it, with far fewer losses. Take by Reveal, an innovative pop-up experience that uses JDA technology to help retailers collect and analyze valuable customer data, allowing them to quickly ID market trends and respond to customer preferences on the spot, while providing a more personalized, connected experience that 86% of shoppers are willing to pay more for. Because the future doesn't knock brick and mortar down, it builds it up. And with the Intel responsive retail platform, retailers can finally bridge the gap between data centers, e-commerce, and stores, and use this dynamic, unified technology.
I think you got the idea, right? I think the way we are saying the retail is changing a lot. And again, I'll probably bring my example of watching those startups at the booths. Most of the solutions which you saw in the video are happening in India as well. You saw the videos of how to try out new things, augmented reality getting added to it. We are looking at smart shelves. We are looking at solutions where we are talking about traffic with beacons and all those wonderful things, and the in-store with IoT coming in. I think those things are happening as we speak, and this is not just like a video where technology, but there are startups out of India very aggressively creating solutions and bringing into retail markets as we speak. I think 5 or 6 areas where the retail experience is going to change. Definitely facial recognition and cognitive insights going to change the way we shop. In-store enhancements for both shoppers and retailers. How do you really add value to your business by understanding the trends, understanding the needs, and then bringing that back to your business model. Making payment systems more agile, and then use all possible interventions in payment technologies to create that shopping experience better. Obviously, it links with the mobile and e-commerce working together, where it's your device on your pocket or device in your shopping cart, aiding you to shop much better. And then obviously, VR and AR to support that customer experience. I think these are things which are going to change the way we have been shopping. And again, the solutions which are linking to these sectors will definitely be in demand in the next few years' time. I think if you look at the blurb on the bottom, I think the very interesting data point, by 2020, even the retailers are going to make investments in IoT, machine learning, cognitive and automation. I think if you had to just look at the sponsors list for NPC this year, I find 4 big retail guys doing it, right? Walmart, Target, Groupon, and one more, I missed. Tesco, yeah. So I think that shows that the kind of interest the retailers have in this space and creating interesting and wonderful solutions to bring together. All right, so let me move to my last slide. Definitely, all of us like to think like an innovator, bring together our energies, focus on the user problems, solving those problems in a creative way. Again, keep a track of the technology boundaries are merging. AI and IoT and VR are not separate technologies anymore. They're all mishmashing together, so we need to understand that. Making sense of creating a business value by really using that with a business model versus just a prototyping is key. And then obviously you need to get into alliances and partnerships early so that you are able to connect with the right stakeholders and then bring that options for your customers ahead of the game rather than changing at the last moment and then I need to really find out what can I do with my product because my customers are asking for a new set of protocols. I think you need to be aware of those partnerships and get into them as early as possible. And obviously you need to work with the business incubators. I'm sure there are a lot of business incubators are in India now, like Walmart Labs, where they are now asking the startups to develop solutions exclusive for their needs. I think that's a very interesting way of getting the innovation done grounds up. And we are seeing the hackathons are coming back. It's no longer meant for students alone. It's a corporate hackathons where enterprises are coming with a problem statement and there are a bunch of startups and innovators coming together to solve those problems, and this is happening at a big levels. Again, you will see a variety of these things happen in the next few years' time in India also. I think that's where the innovation is going to get more prominence by working together an ecosystem of customers, enterprise customers, startups and ecosystem partners like NASSCOM and incubators to come together and make that platform possible. So I think that's what my pitch today was. And last point is that when you look at transformation, it need not be complex. It need not be a rocket science solution. It can be as simple solution which can really solve a problem. Let me give a quick example. I've seen very simple examples working in digital surveillance space, in retail space by creating very simple solutions, not even going to the AR, VR, IoT. Startups are able to create something which is useful and adds value to your businesses. So I think the key pattern is that it need not be always a geeky and very super exciting technology intervention. It can be a simple intervention also, but if it's addressing a problem, I think that can still hold merit. So with that, I stop here. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll probably need to skip the Q&A. But in case you have any questions to ask me, I can always take it offline. Okay. Thank you very much.